Coined by Berkeley professor Carol J. Clover in her 1992 book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws: Gender in the Modern Horror Film, a final girl is the protagonist and lone survivor of a horror flick whom we see scream, stagger, fall, rise, and scream again. More often than not, a final girl is straight-laced, book-smart, and brunette. Throughout the typical slasher, a horror subgenre characterized by a high body count, this archetype repeatedly evades death, discovers bodies in a final girl circuit, and eventually outsmarts the masked killer, or fends him off long enough to be rescued. Seems simple enough, right? Except, in itself, the term final girl implies the existence of a female character who doesn't live to see the credits roll. Hi there, my name is Erin, and in this video I will attempt to summarize the distinction between the girl who survives and the one who does not in terms of agency. A direct foil to the final girl, a character we can call the party girl tends to die first. This vapid, often blonde teenager brushes off suspicion, encourages promiscuous behavior in her friend group, and ultimately dies half naked. Notably, she is portrayed as less intelligent and more sexually adventurous than the final girl.
I forgot my chemistry book.
So who cares? I always forget my chemistry book and my math book and my English book and my French book and, well, who needs books anyway? I don't need books. I always forget all of my books. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you have your books or not.
Throughout the typical slasher, the party girl is repeatedly reduced to her body in the narrative pursuit of both lust and carnage. While this common trope blatantly illustrates some common societal hang-ups surrounding female sensuality, I would argue that it also looks to inform the audience about what makes the final girl valuable. But before getting too far into that, I would first like to introduce objectification theory. Oxford Languages defines objectification as the action of degrading someone to the status of a mere object. But this simple definition doesn't really help us. What does reducing someone to an object really mean? Could one argue that objectification is synonymous with womanhood? Does consent change whether or not it's a negative mechanic? Philosopher Martha Nussbaum, I'm triple checking I'm pronouncing her name right.
Professor Martha Nussbaum.
Philosopher Martha Nussbaum looked to address this confusion in her 1995 article, Objectification. In it, she presents several distinct notions of objectification, which she calls 7 ways to treat people as a thing. All of these ways can be related to the party girl trope in one way or another. Take instrumentality, for example, in which the objectifier treats the object as a tool of his or her purposes. This can be seen in how the party girl is used, both by the characters around her, for example, her equally promiscuous boyfriend, or by the film itself. The party girl is often solely utilized for her sex appeal, a vehicle for delivering nudity and sex scenes. We might also look to viability, defined as when the objectifier treats the object as lacking in boundary integrity, as something that is permissible to break up, smash, break into. In her article, Nussbaum compares instances of sexual objectification in novels to the treatment of inanimate objects such as a pen. In the case of viability, the objectifier sees the pen as something that can be snapped in half without hesitation, without having to take into account the pen's capacity for pain or resistance. In this way, viability can be seen in the death of the party girl. While the slasher ultimately punishes both the party girl and her boyfriend for their indiscretions, it's more common that her death is more brutal and drawn out. Contrasting this, Clover finds that the death of a male is nearly always swift. Even if the victim grasps what's happening to him, he has no time to react or register terror. He's dispatched and the camera moves on. Like I said, all these forms can be related to the party girl trope in some way. However, in the interest of time, I want to focus on the form I think is most central to the party girl trope, inertness. Inertness refers to when the objectifier treats the object as lacking in agency, and perhaps also in activity. To again use Nussbaum's pen analogy, it's not just that I assume the pen has no will of its own, but that I also treat it as if it wouldn't act, even if it could. The pen is assumed to be entirely passive, incapable of initiating any action or resisting external force. One example of this form might be seen in a certain early scene from Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. After experiencing a nightmare starring Freddy Krueger, Tina, our party girl, asks that her friends Nancy and Glenn spend the night at her house. After some typical teenage antics, the group hears a noise outside. The girls cling to Glenn as they investigate, only to be startled by Tina's on-again, off-again boyfriend, Rod. I hate Rod. He announces that he's come to make up with her and asks whether her mother is home. Tina, clearly unsure, lies and says yes. He mocks her nightmare before crudely asking Glenn, ignoring Tina entirely, whether the group was having
an orgy or something
without him. He says he knows Tina's mother isn't home and throws his arm around her and tells the others,
me and Tina got stuff to discuss.
Rod?
Tina wordlessly agrees. As Rod proceeds to physically drag Tina inside, she pleads for Nancy and Glenn to stick around, half joking, "Don't leave me alone with this lunatic." Rod clamps a hand over her mouth and carries her upstairs. Throughout this sequence, Tina is physically handled and spoken to as if she isn't a person. She is largely silent, unmoving, and is ultimately violated. This objectification, rooted in her lack of agency, conditions the audience to view her as disposable. At the same time, this objectification makes the identity of the final girl all the more obvious. Earlier in the scene, when Rod makes a crude joke about his friends having an orgy, he pulls a pocket knife on Glenn. Nancy catches Rod's arm, disarms him, and firmly ends the confrontation.
It's just a sleepover date, Rod. Tina and me. Glenn was just leaving.
After Rod drags Tina upstairs, Glenn attempts to initiate intimacy with Nancy, but she shuts him down, saying,
Glenn, not now. We're here for Tina now, not ourselves.
Where Tina is portrayed as submissive, Nancy stands in stark contrast. In this way, the film elevates the final girl by comparison, using objectification as a visual and narrative shorthand to signal who will survive. That same night, Tina is pulled into a nightmare where she is entirely defenseless as Freddy Krueger pursues her. Just the opposite, Nancy later takes an active role in her survival. Rather than reacting passively, she creates a detailed plan to trap and defeat Freddy Krueger, featuring one of the best fire stunts ever. It's so good. Nancy is portrayed as a capable agent, and within the logic of the slasher genre, that makes her worth rooting for. Of course, this isn't to say that this is a good thing. The distinction between the final girl and the party girl is problematic for countless reasons, and much has been written about subversion of these tropes, or if that subversion is even possible, with horror being what it is. Looking at objectification theory and agency is just one way to look at these tropes. And once you know what to look for, you can never really watch a slasher the same way again. This has been me attempting to discuss the final girl and party girl in relation to agency. Thank you for bearing with me. Bye.